What is your strangest glitch in the Matrix moment that cannot be explained? Redditor 1 saw a dude with no face driving a car. No features at all, it was just blank. I did more than just glance at him, I was staring. Just smooth skin and a men's haircut. I've never told anyone because it's so ridiculous sounding and I don't think people would believe me. Probably a rational explanation for it I suppose, but man, what the hell? Redditor 2 stopped at the gas station on my way to work one morning. I take out my debit card and take my car keys with me and leave everything in the car. Pay for my stuff and throw my debit card in the metal cup I have in my car. Literally half a second later I look down and my card is gone. Pulled apart everything trying to look for it and couldn't find it. I go to work and go home to find it sitting on my desk. Double checked my bank account to make sure it was the card I used and it was. To this day I still have no idea what happened. Edit, wow, this blew up overnight. To answer most questions that I saw, no carbon monoxide leak. We have a monitor in our house and that was the first thing I thought to check. I didn't pull up to a pump, just the normal parking in front of the QT, and was there maybe 7 minutes total. And no concussions in my life ever. Redditor 3 had to do an exam at school. Started off pretty normal, then pretty soon I realized I've done it before somewhere and I remembered what I got wrong the first time, so I pretty much aced the text. The thing is, this was a national test, so there is no way I could have done it already. I have no clue where I would have even done it before anyway, as none of my classmates remembered it. That was the only time I got a high distinction in science class, lol. Redditor 4, I've posted this before but my family go to a garden center near my town every winter, pretty Christmas lights. Well, this one year, the day before we were supposed to go, I had a dream that on our way, the tire of the car came off and we crashed hard. It was such a horrible, graphic dream. My mom's legs had been crushed, my dad stuck, etc. Well, I told my mom in the morning and she joked that she'd check the wheels. She actually must have. She said the car had felt weird and the dream unnerved her. Lo and behold, the tire is loose and needs to be taken to a mechanic. Really weird experience, especially as I've never had a dream feel so real before. Redditor 5, when my son was about 4 years old, one night he started hounding me to ring Nana. I thought it odd to begin with as he had never asked to call her before, so I just put him up for an hour or so and he came back and insisted that I call her. Turns out she was sitting on her lounge experiencing a massive tachycardia event and couldn't breathe. I called an ambulance and met her at the hospital. Same week she had a pacemaker and defib unit implanted to fix the problem. To this day I cannot explain what drove him to get me to call, but I'm very glad he did. He doesn't even remember it. Redditor 6, around 15 years I was on a small road trip with my family. My younger brother and I were in the backseat. I start thinking about a song in my head, from the video game Road Rash 3, which at that point I hadn't played in a few years. A few seconds later my younger brother starts humming the song out loud next to me. I still have no idea what happened. Did we both think about that song randomly at the same time? Did I think it and project it telepathically? Did I read his mind? Why that song, years after we had last played the game? Still bugs me to this day. Redditor 7, I'm so fucking glad this question was asked because the craziest shit happened today. After class today my friend and I were driving back home and a car passed us, but only there was no person in the driver's seat, just a dog. A fucking dog and nothing else. My friend and I both saw it and freaked. A lot of weird shit goes down in my town. Redditor 8, I was kind of interested in a girl a few years back. I didn't know her too much, but I'm sure she noticed it. I didn't want to rush things, so I didn't insist too much. Saw her a few times at friends' parties and the like. Then suddenly within 1 week, I crossed her path twice, randomly in the city. The first time it was awkward. The second time she was clearly afraid and apparently thought I was following her. Total coincidence. Redditor 9, I was looking through a dating hookup app when I found my doppelganger. Well, race change doppelganger. I sent the pic to my closest friend and he was like, "Ha. It's you as a black dude." I sent the guy a message saying, "Ha, I have the same face." He replied, "Thanks." Redditor 10, I arrived 10 minutes early to school one day, so I put on my headphones and started to listen a 10 minutes track I loved, When it was over, I started walking to the entrance, but nobody was there. It was always full of people waiting for it to open, so I thought I miscalculated the time and I was late, but when I checked my watch, only 2 minutes had passed since I arrived, and I sat there for the remaining 8 minutes thinking what the duck had happened. Redditor 11, not my story, but my grandmother's. When my mother was in HS, Grandma had recurring dreams in which Mom was marrying a brown-haired professor who wore a fisherman's cap and smoked a pipe. My dad, who my mom met maybe 5 years or so after Grandma had those dreams, is a brown-haired professor who wears a fisherman's cap and smoked a pipe until Mom made him quit. Okay, he didn't officially become a professor until after they married, but still. Redditor 12, my bedroom at the time lead into the living room that you could see into the kitchen. We also had a bathroom that was directly off our room, in the corner. You couldn't get to it unless you were in our room. I woke up one afternoon. I remember sitting up, checking my phone and lighting a cigarette. I got out of bed, opened the bedroom door, walked into the living room to turn the thermostat up. I saw my ex in the kitchen fiddling around with the coffee pot. Then he started walking towards the back of the house, into the other bedroom. I said, "Hey, you're up early." He looked at me, and kept on walking. I went back into our room and sat on the bed. After a few minutes I called his name, and he opened the bathroom door and said yeah. Apparently he was in the bathroom the whole time. I was very confused and super freaked out because I could have sworn I saw him in the kitchen. There's no way it was him if he was in the bathroom. It shook me up pretty bad. Redditor 13, a year ago I saw myself, 7 years younger, driving past me as I was walking on the sidewalk. Redditor 14, TLDR up front, I have a doppelganger out there. This happened to people I know, not to me directly. A woman who works with my mom was out doing her grocery shopping one night and ran into me at the supermarket. She told my mom about the encounter the next day and asked why I didn't recognize her, as we saw each other once every few weeks when I'd go and help with any heavy lifting at their store. My mom confirmed that it couldn't have been me as I was at home. The woman also mentioned feeling oddly nauseous during the interaction. I was about 16 or 17 at the time. Another woman I know said she didn't know I walked through the park near her home after work. Dumbfounded by her observation, I listened as she explained that she'd seen me every so often after work, walking briskly through a large park which I do know of but have only driven past as if I was exercising. She said I walked close by her the previous evening and she was going to speed up to catch up with me and say hello, but as she started to, she began to feel ill, so she slowed down and then sat on a bench for a few minutes. By then she'd lost sight of me. This happened about 3 years ago and both occurrences were miles apart. Edit, I can't believe I forgot about this, but it happened when I was 20. I was living on campus on the ground floor of a 3-story building. There were only 36 people in the building, so I knew everyone by sight at least when this happened. A new guy moved into the 3rd floor. We'd exchanged pleasantries, and I knew his name and what floor he lived on, but not much else. I was coming out the front door one morning and he was coming down the stairs. He said, "Oh, I just saw your sister going up the stairs." I asked him what he meant, and he said, "Your sister, she's here all the time. She wears her hair the same as you. I used to change my hair a lot. At the time it was midway down my back and fire truck red. There was nobody on campus with hair like mine." I noped out and went back inside. Redditor 15, not the strangest, but the most recent. Early last month I went online to pay a bill, like I've done for years. I get to the last page before finishing and the web page freaks out, with a multitude of display issues before finally receiving an error message. After several attempts to pay I give up, assuming the site is having issues. I go back 2 days later and pay my bill, and it goes through normally, with me getting my usual text and email notifying me I paid. I'm very confused a few weeks later when I check my email and find a notice from the company whose bill I paid, with a semi-threatening email saying the bill is due that day and do I need to set up a payment plan? I've burned dealing with the company for almost a decade and have never been late in paying. I check my credit card account, and there's no record of me paying, not are the text or email I received still in my records. I pay the bill and chalk it up to a senior moment on my part. Last week I get my one credit card bill. It says I never paid my last bill, so now I've got that bill to pay, plus the interest. I find my previous bill, open but with the invoice in place, in my living room. Here's why I'm posting. I'm physically disabled and can't drive, and I always pay that credit card bill in person, after they fucked up my payment years ago. A family member always takes me to my credit union to pay that bill, and like me he remembers us going down to pay the bill they say I never paid. He and I even remember a conversation we had on the way down to the credit union, and going grocery shopping afterward. But yet the bill is unpaid and the bill is in my possession still. TLDR, have had 2 bills in the last month I didn't pay, despite in one case having a witness that I did so. Redditor 16. During my freshman year of high school, I was just talking with my friends like usual, and then one of them pointed to a dude walking across the other side of the courtyard and said, "Hey look, it's you Vectorog." And oddly, the dude walking past had the exact same outfit and haircut as me. I didn't see his face nor did I ever see him again. Shit was weird as duck. Edit, typo, Redditor 17. I occasionally have dreams where a few months or weeks down the line, I experience that moment. But I always forget what the dream was about right up until it happens. My first experience was in 6th grade when I had a dream where I was having a conversation with my teacher. At the time I was sat in the back of the class and that was about when I had the dream. Fast forward 2.5 weeks and I've been moved to the front of the class and it happens. There she is, taking to me about some work I need to do because I was absent for a few days, and then I have this deja vu moment and as she's speaking I'm staring blankly at her remembering this conversation. I told her and her reaction was the exact same as in my dream, facial expressions and all. To this day I still occasionally have these dreams and moment, and to this day there's no way I can explain them. Redditor 18. When I was doing my internship in College City, there was a fella across the way from me as we were traveling on the public transport line. I noticed him because he was wearing an intricate brown suit and checking a pocket watch for the time often. When we both got off at School Avenue, he had a quick pace and was rushing ahead of me. I thought he was crazy when he walked into traffic. He made it past the work van coming at him from the right, and I was terrified for him because a car was coming fast from the left. However, when the work van passed and stopped blocking my sight, so I couldn't see what became of him, he was gone. What the fuck? I still wonder where he went 6 years later. Post edited for privacy. Redditor 19. Yes. I've got a story. I dated this girl a few years back and put first date was weird. She was a friend of my brother and we had known each other a while before going out, kind of friends. Anyway, we're on the date and she tells me that she had a weird dream about me. I had also had a weird dream about her that evening. She goes first. I was driving my teacher's car on my way to see you. We were on the phone trying to find each other. You kept saying I just drove past your apartment, but I was in the middle of nowhere and got really confused. Without really thinking about it, I reply, I was on the phone with you as you constantly drove past my apartment. But it wasn't your normal car and you were really confused. She's just staring at me like I was pulling her leg. Then it dawned on me, holy shit, we had the same dream. We shared 4 or 5 more dreams throughout the relationship at totally random times. She was a nice woman, but we were awful for each other. TLDR, a girl and I shared a dream. Redditor 20, saw the same truck, with the same trailer and same lawnmower make left-hand turns in front of me, a block apart. Not company trucks, trailers. Impossible for them to double back. Redditor 21, I was staying in the hospital after a concussion at 15 years old, fell backwards 8 feet and landed on my back and head, on concrete. I had been out for a few days, only waking for short periods, and not able to keep food or drink down. They gave me multiple CAT scans as I wasn't coming to as expected and they thought I was badly brain damaged. My hospital bed, I was told later, as I had no memories of the visit except for when I was rolled out in a wheelchair, had the siderails up, and I was somehow strapped in as my equilibrium was fucked and I couldn't get out of it without nurse assistance. Except I did get up. This is hard to write. It's just so hard to explain the feeling of this moment. I got up, stepped over my mom who was sleeping on a mat on the floor, and walked to the window to see the amazing view of the hills cast in early dawn light. I looked at the cars way down in the parking lot, the trees behind that wall, the houses and roads and nature leading to the hillside. I felt, I guess, Reset. No pain, no memory, no idea why I was there or where there was. I knew it was me, the way you do, but all the stuff that would have normally been running through my head was absent. I felt completely lucid, still, fresh, new and very much at peace. I never felt that way before, since drugs never come with such clarity. Except I didn't get up, I couldn't have, it wasn't possible. Yet I know to my core, in the way you feel yet can't describe in words, that I saw what I did, and I know that I was there, awake, looking out that window at one of the clearest visions my eyes have ever witnessed, with this incredible feeling of redemption renewal? I don't know, but it felt incredible and so true to my human being. FFS I don't know, I remember it like a one-man alien abduction with no anal probing. The next few weeks I needed help walking, eating, etc., and it was months before I was okay again. I still have minor equilibrium issues 20 years later. I was at the hospital with a friend recently and saw the view from the same floor, but wrong side. Chills, man. I feel like maybe that was the first time I became aware of my soul, but everyone experiences that, and most don't need concussions to get there. Redditor 22, you know the creepy child in a horror movie. The one that doesn't smile and just stares at you. I saw one at an IKEA one time. It just stared at me as if it can penetrate my soul with its eyes. I went to a wedding the following week and there's the duckin' kid again looking creepy as ever because now he's wearing a bow tie. I asked its parent if they were at IKEA or if by any chance this kid could have been at IKEA last week. They said no. This kid's parents were actually nice. At the reception they said they have a single friend they wanted me to meet. It turned out it was my first girlfriend's sister. Redditor 23, as a kid I was sitting home alone watching TV until I lost the TV remote. I was literally tearing up my entire living room trying to find the thing. Eventually I gave up and just sat there watching some stupid channel and then the remote literally fell on top of my head. Redditor 24, in my area there are apiaries. An old girlfriend and I were driving down a back country road, exploring the area, and we both saw an old lady in dark clothes tending to a few beehives in an open field not far from the road. Maybe 50 yards or so from the road. She was covered in bees. I slowed down, the bees covered the woman. And then the bees all flew away, and the lady was gone. There was nowhere she could have vanished to hid. We both saw it happen. Redditor 25, I saw my doppelganger in the airport while waiting for my luggage. Even wearing the same clothes. He was from Spain judging by the flight number on that carousel and I'm from the UK. No, it wasn't a mirror. Redditor 26, wife and I were driving out of TX to come back home to Ohio. We stop at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Kind of a run-down little place, wife goes in while I'm filling up. I finish and pay at the pump and decide to head in and use the restroom real quick. I walk out and the wife is at the checkout paying, wall up and the guy just starts looking at me and then calls me out by my full name. Lieutenant? Yeah? Your name is LT Drinks a Lot, right? Yeah. Do we know each other? Nope. Then how do you know my name? Ha, I dunno. Wife and I look at each other and we both got the heck out of there. I don't have a common name, I had never been to that gas station let alone that town in TX ever. Every time my wife and I think about it we can't explain it. Redditor 27, playing with my friend when I was young by the pond. We spotted some boys and being the bad beach that I am pulled a blueberry flavored lip gloss that I got free in a magazine out of my pocket for us both to use to make the boys like us. I thought that's how life worked. We started hopping along the stepping stones on the pond and the lip gloss falls out of my pocket into the pond. Both myself and my friend saw this happen. I was pissed cause it was the only makeup my mom allowed me to have. Cut to about 5 hours later I get home and go up to my room. Blueberry lip gloss was on my pillow. Redditor 28, one time when I was maybe 7 or 8, my mom was reading The Hobbit to me. We got to a spot I had heard somewhere before. I told her I think she read this part already. She insisted we had never read it and went back to reading it to me. I started saying the lines with her word perfect. She stopped and looked at me while I continued quoting it flawlessly. Redditor 29, the other night I woke up and looked at my phone and it said 12:33 I think. Well, I went to the bathroom and got something to drink and came back to my room and checked my phone again, and it said 11 o'clock. Maybe I was just tired, but it really made me question what happened. Redditor 30, when I was 23 I went to a week's workshop with uni abroad to Barcelona. The workshop was based in an obscure part of the city and I always thought I'd never be able to find that area again. Fast forward about 15 years, I score a job in Barcelona, get off the plane, go to the hotel near my new office, and it's across from said workshop. I worked there for 3 years. When that job ends, I move country again for about 5 years. About a month ago I was invited to interview for a job which I'm now in the process for, and guess where the offices are? Yep, round the corner from the workshop that I thought I'd never find again. It's got me wondering if it's coincidence or should I just move to that area until I work out why the universe keeps sending me there. Redditor 31, after a bath I went to put on clothes, blacked out and woke up on the floor, sitting upright against the sink and dressed. I have no idea what happened, didn't feel sore anywhere like if I had fallen over, and it was as if I sat on the floor and dressed myself while I was unconscious. Felt like 20 minutes had passed even though the bathroom still had steam in it. Kinda just shrugged it off, but I still think about it, haha. Redditor 32, had an odd one at the chemist the other day. I have a very unusual surname. We are all related and know where even the most distant members live. I know for a fact my father, uncle and me are the only males with this name in the country. Guy in front of me had his name called, my fucking surname, and a very similar first name. Never met him or seen him before. Redditor 33, blowing out a candle just to find it's lit again 30 minutes later. Redditor 34, once, I walked into my living room from the hallway, saw my mom in the kitchen pouring a bowl of something fully clothed, important to the story, and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" She ignored me, put something in the fridge, and walked into her room. I figured she didn't hear me and walked into my room. Not even 2 minutes later she walks into my room, soaking wet, in a towel, and tells me she had fallen asleep in the bathtub and had just woken up. Weirdest shit ever. Redditor 35, I see flashing strobes, streaks, dots of light randomly during the night and the day with no definite source. I've talked to mental health doctors about it and they say it's normal. Redditor 36, year 3 or 4 at school in the UK, so I'd have been like 7? Or something. Anyway, at the end of school we all had to line up in our year groups in the yard and we would be led by our teacher to the front of school and either onto the bus or picked up. The pathway from the back to the front of school was narrow, so all single file. I was walking along, chatting and laughing with my peers in front and behind of me. Next thing I know, I'm stood on the path completely alone. The teacher comes running back from around the front of the school and says, "Craig, hurry, you'll miss the bus." I'd literally skipped a few minutes of time. I've always remembered it. Redditor 37, senior year of high school. 30-minute lunch. My buddy and I drove all the way from my school to McDonald's, normally about a 10-minute drive, so 20 minutes minimum there and back, but we stopped by my house in between the school and McDonald's. I grab a shirt, change, leave, drive down the street, get into an altercation with a guy who we flipped off for tailgating. Gun is pulled, we think. He was across the street. Looked like a gun, but who knows. His wife in the passenger seat starts yelling at him. We part ways, go to McDonald's and order food, eat in the parking lot, deciding we are late regardless. We had no access to the time in my car and our phones were in our lockers at the school. We also were frequent ditches tardy kids. Turns out this all occurred in 18 minutes on the dot. It's fucking impossible, but it happened. My buddy and I still talk about it to this day, saying we went through a wormhole or some shit. Or my Nissan, rest in peace, somehow could time travel or slow down time. Redditor 38, on a 4-hour bus ride in Vietnam. Heading towards the end of the trip when we pass a small village near a major city. The bus driver and 2 of his friends were talking and one of them goes, "Wow, look at her." And next to the bus I see a woman with shorts and a t-shirt on taking off her bike helmet. I think nothing of it. That is until we get to the major city and I'm almost at my stop where I see the same exact woman doing the same exact action, taking off her helmet in the same exact motion. The bus driver and his friends also saw her and said, "Shit." Apparently this is common to them as they had a word to describe them. Banshee? Redditor 39, I ran into an old friend from high school that I hadn't seen for a decade. which was odd because I lived several hundred miles from where I grew up. We did a bit of catching up, then went about our lives. 2 weeks later, I ran into him again 5,100 miles away in Germany. Redditor 40, the only time I've ever woke from a dream bawling my eyes out. I just started having anxiety attacks. I never took medication. My brother and I lived in an apartment together with his girlfriend in our late teens. One night I woke up in the middle of the night crying about my brother's girlfriend having a bandage around her head in the hospital, my mother in the background screaming she's too young, and her passing away in my dream. I kept telling her she needed to get her head checked out. I think something's wrong with her head. She always reassured me she's fine. Fast forward 4 years. My brother walking up to me at work bawling his eyes out. He'd been up all night because her drunk mother hit her with her door of her car and hit her head on the concrete. She passed away from a brain hemorrhage. Loved that woman, she was so innocent and beautiful. I don't know why I dreamt that, but it could be coincidence. Redditor 41, I have one that I wish I had an answer for, cause I'd really just like to know WTF was going on. It was Christmas night and I was hanging out with a friend after we were done with our family get-togethers. We were just driving around listening to music and I was looking out the window, people watching. We drove up next to a 4-door sedan and there was a family inside, a man, a woman and 2 small children. The only weird thing was that they were all dressed as ducking clowns. Like big puffy red wigs, white faces, red noses, the works. The weirdness of seeing a car full of clowns and also seeing them on Christmas really freaked me the duck out, and I started screaming at my friend to look over. He's afraid of clowns, so needless to say he lost his shit, and as we were sitting there freaking out they all looked over into our car. That caused him to really freak the duck out and he sped off. Why the duck were those people dressed as clowns? Is there a weird association between clowns and Christmas I don't know about? Redditor 42, I have a dream one night with some vague imagery that I interpreted as my grandmother's soul leaving her body. I woke up knowing she was going to pass soon, but I decided it was just a dream. I called her a couple days later and she said all was fine. 48 hours later, my dad called. She had sepsis and was in the hospital. She never woke up. Redditor 43, I went to sleep on Wednesday and you had a dream that I did everything I usually do on Thursday, to school, have lunch, etc. When I wake up is Friday and curious as heck I ask my family if they remembered what happened yesterday and no one did. One is when I went to sleep at 7 a.m. Thursday and woke up at 4 p.m. Friday in my parents' bedroom. I did sleep there initially. When I asked WTH happened they were confused and didn't understand why I thought I had slept. Thought the day when they remembered me being up until later that day. Sorry if my writing suck, I don't speak English very well. Redditor 44, in high school, I remember going to English and the teacher did roll call. She called my name and I raised my hand and said I'm here, then she stopped. Saying so he's not here then? My friend and I laughed because I was obviously here. Figured she was fucking with me. That night my mom got a call telling her I wasn't at classes today. I was actually marked absent. I go back to school the next day and tell my friend Mrs. English teacher actually freaking counted me absent, and he just said why wouldn't she? Though to myself, haha, you're not funny, but I just let it slide because I though again. I was being fucked with. Then one of my other friends sits down and asks, you feeling better today? Or were you just playing hooky? I was so confused. Then I go to my first hour and that teacher hands me the work I supposedly missed from that day. I looked in my bag and had the same stuff guide and assignments already there. 2. This day. I don't know if I missed that day of school or not. Redditor 45, this is gonna sound silly but I swear it's true and it felt glitchy. I remember a few years back I was trying to patch a hole in drywall at an old job I had. The drywall mud I was using was the normal quick setting stuff I've used at least a dozen times before. Anyway, as I was trying to patch the hole about the size of 1-2 pipe, the mud wouldn't come off the knife. It was almost like I wasn't touching the wall to scrape the mud off, but I know I was touching the wall because the drywall knife was flexing like they do. It took like 4 times for the mud to finally come off the knife and fill the hole. Was pretty strange. Redditor 46, when in the last year of middle school it happened 2 times in the same week. I dreamt about the questions in oral exams their nights before, and I got asked exactly these. Fun facts. I had 124 chance to be extracted for the first test and 112 for the second. These questions weren't asked again for the whole week. In both cases, I decided to look at exactly these answers while traveling to school, with my mom helping me. I got a 10-10 because I knew everything about these. Different professor and subject science and literature. I still don't get how it happened, but that helped me a lot to raise my reputation before finals. Edit, I add that never happened again, after that single strange week. Redditor 47, about a couple of years ago, a friend sent me a video and he asked me if I had a lost twin somewhere. It was a video made by amateur actors from the city I used to live in. There was this girl that looked just like me, she talked just like me, and her part on the sketch consisted of telling a joke I used to tell all the time. I was freaked out of my mind. For some stupid reason I deleted that video and I haven't been able to find it anywhere. And God knows I spent an embarrassing number of hours trying to confirm it even existed in the first place lol. Redditor 48, this happened to me several years ago while I was living in California and working a great job in a downtown coffee house. I loved everything about that job. I worked with fantastic people and our shop was located in the city's historic district in a very old, very beautiful building that had once been a hotel in the 1800s, but has since been converted into apartments, lofts, and of course, the big coffee house on the main floor. Being an early birdie and living only a couple blocks away from the coffee house, I was always scheduled to work the opening shift, which started at 4:15 a.m. It was the most unpopular shift, but it happened to be my absolute favorite one because I loved walking to work in the quiet of the early mornings as the rest of the city was sound asleep. Normally, downtown was quite loud and busy, full of people and constant activity, but in the early hours of the morning, it was still and silent and I felt as if I was the only person in existence, walking through a ghost town. Every day, I arrived about 10 or 15 minutes early for my shift and would wait for my manager on the patio outside of the shop. It was always just the two of us working that early shift, and my manager was often running a little bit behind and never arrived before I did, but I didn't mind at all. I liked to spend some time by myself on the patio outside of the darkened shop gathering my thoughts while I waited for him to walk up with his keys to unlock the doors. One morning, as I was walking to work and approaching our building, I noticed that the coffee house was brightly lit up, as all the lights were already turned on and shining through the store's giant glass windows. I was about 10 minutes early that morning, so I was very surprised to see that my manager had arrived before me and had already started opening up the shop. I walked up to the glass door and pulled on the handle to let myself in, only to find that it was locked shut. That wasn't really unusual, as we often kept the doors of the employee entrance and main entrance locked while we got everything ready for the day and went through our morning procedures until 5 a.m., which was our official opening time. What was unusual, though, was the sound of music I could clearly hear drifting through the speakers inside the store. This was during the holiday season, so we were playing Christmas music throughout the day, but we never turned it on until around 9 o'clock or so in the morning, out of respect for the all tenants living in the apartments above us. But on this particular morning, I could hear the Christmas music already playing its familiar loop at a rather high volume inside the store. I thought it was odd, but decided that maybe my manager was just feeling extra festive that day and wanted to listen to some tunes while we worked. I knocked on the employee entrance door and waited for my manager to come and let me in. I looked through the glass and watched for him. He didn't come, so I knocked again and waited some more. He still didn't appear, so I knocked again. And again. I then walked to the main entrance doors and tried knocking on those, with no luck. I checked my watch and saw that I had 5 minutes until I needed to clock in. I knocked again, much louder this time, and looked inside through the glass door for any signs of my manager. And that's when I heard the muffled sound of voices coming from the back of the store, where the kitchen of our coffee shop was located. At that quiet, early hour in the morning, every sound seems to be amplified, and what I could distinctly hear was two male voices talking and laughing together. That was very unusual, as I had mentioned before that it was normally just me and my manager who opened up the shop, but I figured someone had probably just needed to pick up an extra shift. I knocked yet again and continued to listen to the sounds coming from the coffee shop. The men kept talking and laughing loudly. They seemed to be having a really great time. In addition to the music and the talking and the laughter, I began to hear the sound of clanging dishes, and also the sprayer of the 3-compartment steel kitchen sink being turned on and off, which was very, very unusual as there would be no dishes to wash before the store had even opened. I was also confused as to why my manager and whoever was with him were in the kitchen in the back of the store, because so much of our opening procedures, setting up the pastry case, brewing the coffee, preparing everything for the espresso machine, were done at the front of the store, where I was waiting to be let inside. At this point, I was getting a bit irritated as I was supposed to start work in just a few minutes and I needed to punch in on our time clock. I hated clocking in late for work. I dug out my phone and dialed my manager's cell number. He didn't pick up. So, I dialed the number to our coffee shop instead, and the 2 phones inside the shop, one in the back office and one up front by the register, started ringing. Once. Twice. 3 rings and no answer. Now 4 rings. And 5. I hung up and immediately dialed again, annoyed that they were making such a racket in there with the music and all the talking and the laughter that they probably couldn't even hear the phone at all. Just as before, nobody answered. I hung up and redialed the store for the 3rd time. The phone rang and went unanswered, and so I binged on the door yet again to no avail. I looked at my watch. I was officially late for work. As I was standing in front of the locked door with my phone against my ear, becoming more and more irritated, I noticed a pair of headlights reflecting in the glass, rolling up behind me. I turned around and saw something I did not expect at all. It was my manager. "I'm so sorry I'm late," he said as he climbed out of the driver's seat and shut his car door and hustled up to the shop's entrance. "I tried to get here as fast as I could," he said, as he moved toward me and fumbled with his keys trying to find the one to the shop door. "You're mad," he said, "I can tell." "I'm really sorry." Completely confused, I put my phone away and turned to head into the store with him. And that's when I lost my breath for a minute. The coffee shop was totally dark. None of the lights were on. Not one single light. And it was dead quiet. The Christmas music had stopped, and so had the voices and laughter. All of the loud noise had disappeared. Every sound I had been listening to just seconds before had suddenly vanished. "I promise I'll be here on time tomorrow," my manager said as he fit his key into the lock. "I'll even be early. You'll be shocked." Little did he know that I could not possibly be more shocked to see him than I was at that very moment, as he opened the door to the silent, completely empty coffee house. Redditor 49, my husband and I were on a train in Melbourne, and we looked up into the sky, and there was a pixel missing. Like a perfect, white square out of the sky. It was just small, but it didn't move even as the train went onwards, and there was nothing holding it up. So weird, and we both saw it, so not imagining things. Redditor 50, spent a day in town with a friend when I was like 15. We both headed to my place for lunch, but when I got there my ma'am asked me why I was back already. She went on to explain that it just came home, ate, got my pocket money from her and left again. A doppelganger ate my lunch and stole my pocket money. Redditor 51, I used to collect cards as a kid, baseball cards, hockey cards, comic book cards, etc. I was collecting cards from the original TMNT movie at the time, and there was only one card missing in my set. I couldn't get my hands on it no matter how many packs I bought. My family was on a road trip and I was in the back seat with the window open. A truck passed us on the highway and there was a huge gust of wind. My one missing Ninja Turtles card blew into the open window and landed on my lap. Redditor 52, I had an electronic watch that was set to remind me to pick up my foreign exchange student from high school after football practice. One day it just disappeared after he left, and the alarm wasn't telling me where it was. Fast forward about 18 months, and the alarm starts sounding in the living room every day at pickup time. I tore the living room apart, including checking the deep recesses of the sofa, and behind the baseboards, and never found the watch. It stopped again after about 6 months, I'm assuming from dead batteries. I never figured out where it went for 18 months. Redditor 53, woke up one morning, went into the living room, and there was a pile of at least 100 maggots in the middle of the living room. Fat fuckers, too. No idea where they came from, or perhaps more disturbingly, what they had eaten to get to that size. Redditor 54, I've posted this before then again, it fits. I'm not the kind of person to have a great many friends, but those friends I do keep are sacred to me. So one evening I was getting out of a Rotterdam subway block to go to my apartment near there, when I see an old friend, one I haven't seen in the flesh in a few years, heading into the subway. I call out his name, he turns, waves and makes this call me gesture, then the doors close and the subway rides off. 30 seconds later, my phone rings. It was my friend, who told me he'd just seen me get in the normal train he'd used to get home from the bar. Apparently, I had grinned, waved, gestured call me, the door shut and the train drove off. I lived in Rotterdam. He lived in Enschede. That's just over 200 kilometers apart. Or about 125 miles. Redditor 55, when I was first teaching myself to speak Croatian, I would come home every day from work with a few new words in my vocabulary, and the day I learned the word for rabbit, zek, sounds like sits, and isn't anything close to the English word rabbit, I came home to my dog bouncing through a few feet of snow like a rabbit, so I nicknamed her Bila Zek, or White Rabbit, in Croatian, and I called her that literally a half dozen times or so when there was no one around. Later that day, my 10-year-old sister with Down syndrome came home from school, and she doesn't speak English or any other language very well, and she has trouble pronouncing more than a word or two at a time. But when she came home, she went right upstairs to my room, pointed at my dog, and to my absolute astonishment, she very clearly said White Rabbit. I had never called the dog that in English, and that was the first day I ever heard the Croatian word for rabbit, so there is nowhere for my little sister to have heard this before, and needless to say, the experience gave me goosebumps and a newfound respect for the magic of my little sister with special needs. She has continued to surprise the family and keep us guessing about the nature of our reality. Redditor 56, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I used to like to sleep in the same bed as my sister. One night, my sister had fallen asleep before me and I was sitting up in bed. I glanced at the alarm clock and read the glowing 11 p.m. time clearly. I then turned my head to look behind me, for whatever reason, and by the time I had turned back, the clock read close to 3 a.m. I was still sitting up and my sister was still asleep. I have no recollection of those 4 hours, but very clearly remember what seemed to be an instant of turning around and back forward. Redditor 57, in middle school some friends and I were skating to the mall. We were in the street in a residential area when a car backed out of a driveway right in front of me, on the right-hand side of the street. There were cars parked at the curb, so I couldn't it coming until the back fender was already in front of me. Stupidly I veered to my right, hit the curb and left my board, airborne on a pretty flat trajectory. I closed my eyes and braced for impact, and landed on my back in the grassy front yard of the guy who backed out in front of me. It knocked the wind out of me but wasn't too bad. When I sat up and looked around, I was on the other side of a fence, wrought iron and brick with hedges, had to be 10 feet from where I hit the curb. There is no way in heck I should have cleared both his car, and the fence and hedges and everything. I still think I discovered how to no-clip IRL. Redditor 58, okay, so, I was in my bedroom. It was winter, nighttime, so the windows were shut, all doors were shut, no fans on, no breeze basically. I think this is a thing other girls do, or maybe I just got it from my mother, it's for airing. But my bra was hanging vertically from the closet doorknob, like one of the straps was on the doorknob and the bra just hung down vertically. It had been there like all night. Out of nowhere it swung like a pendulum, from completely motionless, to almost a 45-degree angle to the left, then to the right, back to the left, and did this a few times before coming back to a complete stop. It's really weird, and doesn't make any sense. There was nothing happening that could have caused that motion. It also swung in such a stiff way, it didn't twist or turn, just like a pendulum, back and forth a few times then stopped. No idea what it was. Redditor 59, I once loaded and started my dishwasher, then put some food in a crockpot. Several hours later we ate said food for dinner. I went to clean up but couldn't find the crockpot lid. I ended up finding the crockpot lid in the clean dishwasher, which had been run prior to preparing dinner and hadn't been opened until after dinner. Redditor 60, after reading some of the comments mine feels a little stupid, but anyway. I remember considering buying Super Smash Bros. For my 3DS but deciding not to because Kirby wasn't on it, he's my favorite. I even remember watching a YouTube video about why Kirby isn't in Smash for the 3DS and something about if Nintendo will ever add him. Fast forward to Ultimate Smash Bros. For the Switch being announced and seeing that Kirby is included. I tweet about being happy Kirby is added to the roster only to receive a reply from a friend that he's always been in Smash. Being a little embarrassed and very confused, I start looking it up on Google only to find Kirby on the cover of Smash Bros. For the 3DS. I'm still confused to this day. Redditor61, when I was around 7 years old, me and a friend saw a hand crawling around a house window, a hand. Like the one from Addams Family. Redditor62, a few years ago I was listening the radio in the kitchen, while my brother was watching Shrek on DVD in the lounge. Live and Let Die comes on the radio, but it sounds a bit odd, like there's a second track playing over the top. I turned it down and it turns out that the same song was playing at almost but not exactly the same time on the film as it was on the radio. Redditor63, I had a dream when I was about 7 where I got a t-shirt, and hated it. In my dream I decided to throw it away in a corner of my room, not in the trash, just in a pile of other stuff. About 4 years later I got another shirt in real life exactly like the one I threw away in my dream. A couple nights after I got the new shirt I had a dream where I went to the corner of the room where I threw the shirt away 4 years ago and picked it back up and starting wearing it. Not unexplainable, but it was bizarre to know that I remembered such a random dream 4 years later. Redditor64. When I was young, probably around 8-12 age, in my closet we kept all of our board games. They were on a shelf that was much taller than me and I would have to reach to get them on my tippy toes. Over time they started to dust up because I was the youngest and my older siblings were always out and about and didn't care for our games anymore, and I can't play them alone, so they just sat there for years dusting up. They were there for so long that I knew where each game was because I saw them every time I needed to grab a shirt. One night I'm sleeping in my bed, I'm still preteen at this point, but I'm sleeping and wake up to a super loud crashing noise in my closet, as if something fell or broke in there. Now I'm young, it's dark, I can't really see anything, so I'm absolutely terrified right now. My door is closed and everyone is asleep, there's no possible way someone is in my closet right now for any reason. I don't know if any of you Redditors experience extreme fear kinda like this, but I was like 10 or 11. But you're so scared that you're paralyzed, can't move and start to sweat. I was not about to go into the dark and open the door, and was not gonna get up and turn on the light, I was paralyzed. Eventually I sit long enough in fear that I do fall asleep. The next day I wake up and look in my closet and actually see a game in the ground open and pieces lying everywhere as if it did fall off the shelf. Now if you put it together, this isn't possible. The game was one of the ones stacked under 3 or 4 others, and those are still up there stacked just without the one on bottom. Those games had all been sitting there for months and months now. There's no way it was in a position to fall or anything like that, and there's no way in the middle of the night, an older sibling was coming into my room, into my closet, throwing a game on the ground, staying in there afterward long enough for me to fall asleep again before leaving, etc. They weren't like that anyways. So strange. Still remember the fear and confusion of that night as a kid, and have no idea how that happens. Or why. Why did that happen? Who knows? Strange shit, man. Redditor65, I saw a giant thing similar to a manta ray outside the airplane window. Other people say it was many windows long. It was made of something similar to oil. This is really weird to this day. Has anyone seen something like this? Redditor66, the time glitch. Sometimes you can notice some bugs in it. For example, when I was going to school, my mom sometimes woke up very late and had only 5 minutes to cook. In those 5 minutes she somehow cooked meals that you have to cook for a half of hour or more. But that's only possible if there's no one in the kitchen or watching. Weird. Example 2, walk back and forth in your room. Then look at your clock. You'll see that it stopped. A second later it will begin moving again. Redditor67, around 2003, my roommates and I saw a small whirlwind on top of a tall tree outside our apartment. It just sat there, consistent as can be, for about an hour. The best explanation I can come up with, the tree was about 10 yards away from the corner of a hot parking lot. Parallel to the parking lot and converging near the tree was a shallow stream, sometimes dry, cut fairly deep into the earth. So, hot air from parking lot, cold dusty air from stream equals whirlwind on a tree. Or it was a dimensional vortex. Redditor 68. In 1972 I was in a Montreal metro subway, and I noticed that the woman on the platform across from me looked exactly like the woman standing right beside me. When I stepped forward and looked down the platform, every one of the people on my side had a twin directly opposite them on the other platform, and then a train pulled up on the other side, pulled away, and every one of the doppelgangers was still there. I freaked out and just ran out of the station. Took buses home instead. Redditor 69. When I was in high school, I got a call from our very first landline number. We moved houses twice and have had 2 new landline numbers ever since. I thought maybe the number got recycled for a new customer or something. But what would it call my mobile number, which is also just months new? Weird. Redditor 70. I was at a gas station getting a coffee. I absolutely love gas station coffee, and this was somewhere I always stop before heading to work. I went to pay for my coffee and I tap my card. The lady at the till tells me it was declined. I try inserting it with my PIN because maybe my tap wasn't working. The lady said it was declined again. There was no one else in the gas station at that time, so I'm like, hold up. Let me check my online banking because I had just gotten paid and knew I had money. I go to my online banking and it says that I paid. I show her the transaction and she starts insisting that it didn't go through on her end. Like, okay lady, I am not paying for the same coffee twice. Eventually she lets me go and says she will check her settlement later. Next day I go in to grab another coffee and a lady tells me that I stole the coffee the other night but doesn't make me pay for it. I am angry because I just got a lecture when I know the money for the coffee came out of my account. I checked my online banking later and there was no transaction for the coffee. Redditor 71. Biking back from school with a friend one day. We were talking and suddenly I got a really strange deja vu. I remembered that exact moment as if it had happened once before and knew what he was gonna say next. Then he said it. Nothing mind-blowing, but more than 14 years later I still can't explain it. Redditor 72. About a year ago I was at a restaurant alone when after 10 minutes at my table I watched someone who looked exactly like me and was dressed exactly like me, go to get a table, sit down, fidget in the same ways I do and order the same meal. The strangest part was at some point we made eye contact, so we waved at each other at the exact same time, then both tried going to the bathroom. Since he was going I decided to stay at my table and he never came out of the bathroom. Redditor 73. I wake up crying that I died and won't see my loved ones because I have intense dream. I was put into a simulation machine where dying caused death in real life. Weird dream. Once while physically exhausted from having a fight with a person Earl, I started seeing everything in outlines as if it was a computer simulation, but I zoned back to normal after I did a little shake up. I feel like it must been that LSD flashback people talk about, but it was freaky. Redditor 74. I saw a car being driven by no one at all. It was one of those shitty 90s Puntos, so I don't think it was one of those self-driving cars. Redditor 75. A few years back, I was leaving to work abroad for a couple of years, so my dad gave me a necklace with a pendant of St. Christopher, the patron saint of traveling, on it. I wore it daily until the chain snapped. I remember it well because the pendant came off and there's no clasp on it, only chain links. Fast forward to a few months ago, I bring it with me still broken to get it fixed when I'm back in the States. Put it in the cup holder and leave it until I get to the jewelry store. I pick it up and somehow, it's complete again. No breaks at all. I searched for a spot it could have temporarily caught on the next link, but it couldn't have. Part of it snapped clean off before. Couldn't find any breaks at all. Makes absolutely no sense, but I'm wearing it as we speak. Redditor 76. A few days ago I went camping and took a few snacks with me, one of which was a can of Pringles. On the first night I clearly remember eating half the can and even offering some to a friend before putting it back in my bag. The next afternoon I check my bag and pull out the can only to find out it's full. I was so confused and searched my entire bag to see if there was any other can, but this was the only one. I packed only one can and no one else on the trip had a can of Pringles. I even offered it to my friend and he jokingly asked me, If you had 2 cans of Pringles, why didn't you give me one? And I told him this was the only one I brought. Even he clearly remembered me eating half of it on the first day and was surprised it was full the next day. But hey, I'm not complaining. Like they say, a full can of Pringles is better than half. TLD are magical can of self-filling Pringles. Redditor 77, a friend sent me a picture of a guy downtown once. Looked exactly like me, rapping on a street corner, dressed exactly like how I dress. I used to rap, so he thought it actually was me at first. Only, I have never, and would never, be caught dead wearing a John Cena t-shirt. Redditor 78, when I was younger my dad always woke me up for school. He would knock on my bedroom door and then open it. Just before this happened one morning I was dreaming I was stood next to my bed just watching myself sleep. I saw the door open and my dad was there, so I jumped at my sleeping self, rolled over and said, "Morning, Dad." That really freaked me out and I still remember it so well. Redditor 79, when I was in 6th form myself and another girl would get lifts from one of our teacher because we lived so far away. This meant we would get into school earlier than anyone else. One morning we get in and take our coats off. I put mine in one of the lockers that were free and we sat in front of them. We did not get up until we were going to our first class. As we get up I go to get my coat so I can take it along with me. It was nowhere to be found. I looked and tried to open every single locker and there was no sign of my big bulky winter coat. Anyone who walked past we saw, so that was out of the question. I never found that coat. Redditor 80, had a nightmare about a guy standing inches away from my face. He told me if I closed my eyes I would die. Later that day went to a dentist. He said the exact same words. I said, "Excuse me?" He told me the second time to not close my mouth, but I knew what I heard. Redditor 81, well, it just happened. In the thread about the hidden problems in the world we ignore, that was just posted I might add. I remember reading the exact thread, verbatim, weeks ago. But for the life of me can't prove it. Deja vu. Redditor 82, once when I was a hyperactive kid I was running around a large clothing store that had a circular layout. I ran and found a path that led down the middle that led me to a display window with mannequins that faced a part of the mall I'd never seen before. I got scared, not sure why, and ran back, and when I tried to go back I never found it, and I still visit the store as an adult and it has no window with mannequins and the part of the mall I saw does not exist. Redditor 83, when I was a kid, me, my mom, and 2 sisters were driving through the mountains in Mexico when suddenly the car died and we had no brakes or anything. My mom pulled the emergency brake and thought we were gonna fly off the cliff. My older sister was the only one awake as it was the middle of the night and she screamed out, "Daddy," because she was scared we were gonna all die. Luckily the car stopped in time. So right after it happened my mom called my dad and he said he heard my sister screaming for him in his dream. Redditor 84, when I lived with my dad long before he passed I was dozing off to sleep in my room while my TV was on low volume. At some point my TV got super loud randomly, then low and then loud again. Thinking I was laying on the controller I started searching for it but spotted it on the floor and I adjusted the volume, rotated the batteries in case of whatever and began to rest again. A few moments later it happened again and I sat up irritated. I'm thinking the batteries are low so I go to turn off the TV when my door suddenly swings open and my closet door creaks open. I just sat in bed frozen for a moment and I called for my dad and sister thinking they might have opened my door for whatever reason and no response, so I got my white ass up and hauled my ass down the hall to my sister's room, woke her up and she was like, "Whatever, you big baby." Goes to my room, checks it out, comes back and tells me I need to stay in her room for the night. She's the only one that knows about this. Redditor 85, last night I dreamed about today. I woke up for a while and went to bed again. I dreamed that I was dreaming about today, wake up and tell about it to my GF. And the day went the same as in both of my dreams. Redditor 86, just a few days ago, went bowling with the family. I got glass of water and drank just under half. I put it down on the table to take my turn and on the way back, 30 seconds later it was gone. The thing is, the table was in front of my watching family, between them and me, and no one bust it, no one drank it, and it was nowhere to be found. Rift in the universe maybe? Redditor 87, we live in the house. I was about 6 years old and mom asked to go to basement after some jam which was stored into jars. I went down the stairs and we have all kinds of gardening stuff in the basement. We also had a wheelbarrow, don't know the word in English for it, against the wall so the wheels are facing away from the wall and are in the air. It was dark in there and I kind of stopped by the wheelbarrow to look at it as I was a little kid and I was curious and interested in it. There I was standing and one of the wheels started spinning by itself. At first I was very surprised and confused and then I got very scared and started crying. I don't know why I didn't run away. I just stood there horrified and crying. My mom came to stop the wheel and comfort me. I told her that the wheel started spinning by itself while crying and she just replied something like there. You must have made it spin with your mind power. Let's go eat some gruel. I was very scared to go to the basement after that for some time. Redditor 88, I was in 4th grade, when we were informed we were getting a new girl in class. Everyone talked about it for the rest of the day, and at night I had a dream of the new girl, and how I would first see her walking into class. The next day, the new girl walks into class, and I do a double take, because it's the exact girl from my dream. Literally the exact same girl, walking into class the exact same way I dreamed it. It wasn't deja vu, and I had never seen the girl before this, not even a picture. It was definitely a vivid dream, that I still remember it to this day. Super strange. Redditor 89, ooh, okay, I have a good one for this. I'm a pretty big gym enthusiast. When I enter my condo unit, directly in front of me, is a small shoe shelf. It's there that I keep my gym gear, knee wraps, weighted belt, lifting belt, bands, boxing gloves, shoes, etc. On top of the shelf, I always leave my gym card. The shelf is black, the card is black and red, the red stands out. About 6 months ago, I couldn't find my gym card. I searched throughout my unit. Usually, I just leave it on my shelf as described, but sometimes it may be in my wallet or on my kitchen table. But after searching thoroughly, I couldn't find it. Over the next 4 weeks, I probably searched for it another half dozen times. My girlfriend at the time helped me search a few times as well and we couldn't find it anywhere. I figured I'd lost it. One day, I do one last major search and when I can't find it, I figure it's definitely lost. I go to the gym front desk and tell them I lost my card but I'd forgotten to bring my wallet, so I told them I'd pick it up and pay for a new card the next time I came in. I do my workout and head back home. I open the door and sitting directly in front of me, on the black shelf, in the same fucking spot I always left it, was my gym card. I even called my GF, asked her if she'd found it or seen it, and she reminded me we'd both searched for it and couldn't find it. Was so bizarre, but I've had multiple weird things happen in this condo. Shrug. Redditor 90, I had a big crush on this person. I was on public transport when I saw a couple. There was this girl who looked just like me, about 10 years older than I was about that point, so my current age, and a guy who looked just like my crush but a bit older too. My crush was quite a bit older than me. She left and kissed him goodbye. I started a conversation with him, not uncommon in the rural area I live in. We exchanged names. He had the same first name as my crush. If they were a future us, they would have been from a different timeline. I married a different guy and my crush married a different girl. Redditor 91, my grandparents own a small cabin that my family uses from time to time. In the basement is a small laundry room, with a deadbolt that locks on the inside and only one entrance. No windows. One day my brother and I were watching TV and my mom comes and gets us and tells us to go outside and wait for her there. She comes out and calls my dad, who was running errands, and then the police. The laundry room downstairs is locked from the inside. We were not staying with anyone else. Police come and get the door open. No one was in there. It's a deadbolt, so you literally cannot lock it from the outside. That was probably 15 years ago and I still think about it all the time. Redditor 92, in my mid-20s one day I suddenly remembered a girl in 8th grade who only went to my school a year. Couldn't remember her name and wondered whatever happened to her. The next day the head of accounting introduced me to her in his office. That was her first day on the job. She recognized me after I asked if she'd gone to my junior high. I'm still shocked. Redditor 93, lifelong skeptic and man of science. Last year when Dad died, once his body had been taken away, I was doing the rounds and calling the family to let them know one of the joys of adulthood. At one point I had my mobile in my left and the cordless home phone in my right, and my mobile started to ring. Any guesses what number came up? Of course it was Dad, the phone I was holding in my right hand and definitely not calling myself on. I answered and said hello a few times. Just heard this long distance clicking or tapping noise like a ball bearing trying to bounce. I hung up after 20 seconds or so and I've not been able to explain it. Redditor 94, does it see you? And if it didn't happen to me but I was involved in the situation? I was born with a cleft lip and palate. This meant a lot of surgeries as a baby toddler. After one such surgery, my parents were driving in town during rush hour with me in my baby's seat in the back and my stepbrother sat next to me. Everyone was silent in the car. Then my mom heard a strong, clear, male voice tell her to check the baby. When she did, she found me blue and ragdoll as I'd stopped breathing. No one else heard the voice. With Mum doing CPR to me on the dashboard, my father drove like a lunatic to the nearest hospital. He drove up and down pavements, wrong way around roundabouts and through a gap between a pedestrian subway and a building at high speed. A few days later, he went back to that gap and realized that there was no physical way that his car could have passed through that gap. To this day, neither event has been explained. Redditor 95, funnily enough I was in a queue last night to get into a gig. The weather was pretty rough, everyone was in like waterproofs, except this 910 who walked past with this short skirt. She glanced at while walking by. Lucky me. Now my back was against the wall, so I was only facing one way. Plus I was at the front of the queue. I swear this girl walked by me again from the same direction, looked at me in the same way. Now it's not impossible that she walked a full circle around the block, but in that weather? In that area? On her own? Deja vu? Redditor 96, my depression got worse early this year, and I had my standards. I cut and overdosed myself. I was at my lowest and I had lost all my friends over it. It was the part of my life that I almost 100% officially decided to leave this world for good. So strangely, ever since I started getting worse, I noticed that there had been funerals happening like anywhere and everywhere I go. There was a few funerals that happened nearby where I live, and it wasn't once, it was multiple times. Even if I go anywhere, there was bound to be a funeral nearby. Even recently, 2 people I know passed away too. It is so goddamn strange to this day, and I thought it was really abnormal. Since the past few years I've only seen 1 or 2 funerals. Is it a Matrix moment or coincidence? I have no idea, but I knew it was the biggest damn sign I've ever seen in my life. Redditor 97, I was once riding out to a job on the J train in NYC. A guy with a pink shirt got on at a stop and stood against the doors with his back to them. Wasn't paying too much attention to his appearances, just really noted the shirt because it was a bright color and I had nothing else to do. A couple stops later, he gets off the train by stepping backwards into the platform. I laughed internally a bit, thinking that's a weird way of getting off a train, but whatever. And then 3 stops later, he gets back onto the train. Same guy, same shirt, same doors. I had to get off a couple stops later though, so I didn't get to see where he left again, and the train was so full around him that going by him wasn't really an option. I had to leave out another pair of doors. I never did see his back. To this day, the only explanation I can really think of is that he's one of those parkour guys who films videos of himself getting to train stations before the trains arrive. Redditor 98, my sister and I were driving in Kentucky. We see a commercial airplane overhead really close to the ground. We were on the highway and the plane was 600-700 feet above the ground. It was so close that we could see each window on the plane. As we get closer, we notice that this commercial plane is hovering in the air, not moving forward. We proceed to drive under the plane, and the moment we pass under it, I look into the rear view mirror and side mirrors, and I could not see the plane. My sister then proceeded to open the window and stick her body out the window to try and see this plane. The plane disappeared, within seconds after we pass it. We both freak out a little bit and we continue to talk about whether we saw what we saw. My sister brings up my dash camera and how I recorded everything, so we should watch the footage. Side note, My dash camera records in 10-minute intervals and it creates a new video file every 10 minutes. So we find the video clip that ended right before the whole plane incident happened. That clip works perfectly fine. My sister tries to open up the last clip on the SD card with the plane footage, and that video file is corrupt and will not open. She tried to run different tests to see if she could get it to open, and the file would not work. She decides to record another video on the dash camera to see if it had anything to do with the camera itself, and that video worked perfectly fine. Every video before and after that specific file works perfectly fine except for the video file containing that plane footage. We still can't figure out how that happened. Redditor 99, walking home in the early hours of the morning, a guy that looks really pale and is wearing a long black coat walks past me. I didn't notice him approaching me even though I was looking straight ahead and wasn't spacing out. I look behind me about 2 seconds after he passes me and he's vanished. There was nowhere he could have gone. I still think I must have hallucinated it. Redditor 100, I was watching King of the Hill and it was the episode where Hank starts to sing Peaches by the band The President of the United States. The song got stuck in my head, and as I was driving to work I changed the radio station and that song was playing. I haven't heard that song on the radio in years. Stuff like that used to happen to me all the time when I was younger. I would be thinking of something specific and I would either see it on TV or hear it on the radio shortly afterwards. I remember one time I was watching TV and I was thinking about ordering a pizza and a Pizza Hut commercial came on as I was thinking about it. Redditor 101, I was 11 and leaving school with my friends. I had this terrible feeling something awful was going to happen. I told my friends about it and then we left school to walk home. On the way home I got hit by a car. Redditor 102, this is a weird story my mom said she could never explain on how I knew. Keep in mind I was about 5 years old during this. This is a long read so I apologize. My mom is a flight attendant and speaks fluent French. We're from the US, because of that we would travel as a family to Paris quite a bit and would borrow my mom's friend's apartment. There was a shortcut you could take that would cut in between 2 walled gates to reach the apartment a little quicker. This isn't really an alleyway but more a small ramped path. Me and my mom had gone through this path many times to get to the apartment at all times of day and night. It never had a sketchy or off-putting vibe. One evening my mom was with me and was heading back to the apartment to meet up with my dad and little sister. She was about to head down the shortcut when, how she explains it, I pointed into the shortcut and said that a lion was down there and it was going to eat us. She said I was adamant there was a lion and not head down the path, so she took the long way to avoid me fussing. After going all the way around she decides to check from the other side of the path just out of curiosity. She says there were 3 men hanging around near a corner that was nearly impossible to spot coming from the way we would have went. She felt in her gut that they weren't there harmlessly and if she went down there with only herself and a small child that something terrible would have happened. To this day she tells me this story every once in a while and doesn't know how I knew or sensed not to go down that path that night. I still think about it every now and then. Redditor 103, lost my ID a few years ago. Looked in every drawer, coat pocket, pants pockets, and purse that I owned. Even looked in my dad's car, despite almost never being in it. Searched the street where I walked most often, couldn't find it. Oh, well. If anyone found it, I just hoped it made a good fake for someone simultaneously lucky and unlucky enough to look like me. It was due to expire in a month anyway, so I just shrugged it off and got a new one. Fast forward a year later, I go to the store for booze, with my new ID. I go to pull it out of my wallet, give it to the cashier, and she tells me I can't purchase my booze, as my card is expired. Kudos to her for actually checking that, no one ever does. How what? I look down at my card, and lo and behold, it's the old one. Old picture, old dates, and well past expired now. I nod, in total shock, and go home boozeless. The new card is sitting on my desk when I get there. WTF.exe is launched. I put the new ID back in my wallet and leave the old one on my desk. Wake up next morning, and it's gone again. Redditor 104, I live in Wisconsin and in winter it is very snowy and cold. A couple of years ago I lost my jacket in the middle of winter and couldn't find it. I tore apart my entire house looking for it, searched my car, looked at work. I finally accepted that I must have left it somewhere. I went and bought a new one. A few weeks go by and I'm minding my business at home one day, killing time on the internet. I click on a horoscope for my sign just for shits and giggles. It says the usual nonsense, and the last sentence said to look behind the couch for whatever you misplaced. That's oddly specific. Okay, I'm interested. My couch was completely wedged against the wall, but I decided to go and look anyway. I pull it away from the wall and there I see my jacket. Redditor 105, when I was a freshman in college, I drove a 1996 goldish colored Cavalier. I wrecked it in the snow and had to get a new fender and hood. Only color I could get was teal. Fast forward to that summer and I'm driving home when a teal Cavalier with a goldish hood and fender drives past me in the opposite lane. Redditor 106, at my old job we just got there and were listening to the radio and I for some reason thought of a song, and after the song playing on the radio finished, the song I was thinking of came on right after. I think, that's pretty cool. No, it happened 3 or 4 more times in a row. Maybe I just subconsciously remembered the radio's playlist or something. I don't know, I barely listened to the radio except at work, but it was really freaky. Redditor 107, once I want to get money out of an ATM. So I took my wallet out of my pocket to get my credit card, but it was gone and I freaked out. After 5 minutes searching I looked at the ATM and saw that my card was already inside of the device, but I never touched the ATM. Well, that was strange. Redditor 108, at around the age of 10 my dad and I were returning home from a trip to my uncle's house. We were away for about 3 days and when we opened the door we found that someone had broken into our side door and robbed us of a lot of electronics and valuables. At the time my mother and her boyfriend didn't live too far away to make things easier with me going back and forth between households every day because of their work schedules. My dad freaks out and loses it while I decide to run over to my mom's place and tell her what happened and to get her to call the cops. Now, like I said before, my mother and father, while being divorced, lived very close to each other. Only about 4.5 blocks away on the same street. A very open and plain street where you should be able to see everyone walking down it during the daytime. And yet somehow in the time it took me to practically sprint those 4.5 blocks, it turned out that my dad already called my mom. She walked down to his house the exact same path I took, beat me there, and then said she had been there for a few minutes already. To this day I don't understand what happened. I should have seen my mother walking down the sidewalk or on the street regardless of where I was walking because how open everything was. Not only that, but the fact that I ran and she still beat me by a few minutes makes me think I somehow lost a couple minutes of my life. Redditor 109, when I was really little, like 3 or 4, I used to hold onto the shopping cart while my mother pushed it through the supermarket. She had to get something from a shelf and told me to wait with the cart, so I did. For whatever reason I decided to close my eyes, and a minute later an elderly woman said excuse me and told me this was her cart. I opened my eyes and sure enough I was holding on to a different cart. Except I never let go of my mother's cart or moved. This happened one other time and it was an elderly man the next time. Redditor 110, I was hiking alone in the wilderness. I know, bad idea to begin with. I was coming down this increasingly steep rock face. I get to a point where it's too steep to continue down. I didn't have any ropes or other gear. I find a slot in the rock face. Imagine an elevator shaft that is open on the front. 15 or 20 feet away is another similar structure. I check out the first one and decide it is not doable. The second one looks worse. I go back to the first one. My next memory is being below the slot and continuing my hike. I have no memory of getting down. I know I didn't fall. I had no bumps, bruises, or scrapes. Redditor 111, once I was having a bad dream. In the dream I could see my alarm clock. I can't in real life, it's on the other side of the room. The time read 3:26. I was being chased by something and a voice said in my dream, "Wake up." I startled awake and got up and walked to my alarm clock. It was 3:26. Redditor 112, when I was younger I woke up and looked out my window to the backyard. There was a pair of red eyes suspended in the air. I freaked and ran into my brother's room. He was awake looking at the floating red eyes as well. To this day we both recall how freaky it was. Redditor 113, my name tends to get lost. A lot. My government has a hard time with my name, my school has a hard time with my name, my bank, my pharmacy. It doesn't matter, my name gets lost. I feel like it's because of a curse on my Scottish surname, well-documented 13th century curse from a church official, but it could be because my name doesn't stick out of a crowd. It's not wildly unique, nor is it exceptionally common. That might not seem like a glitch, but 2 times my uni has denied I'm a student. I'm in my 2nd year of my degree, and 3rd year of being at the uni. They straight up could not find me in their system. I had to pull up my class schedule and email to prove it to them. They had to re-enter me in the system despite it being 2 months into my 2nd semester the first time, and a month into my 4th. Not enough? Okay, well, I have walked into my bank, the same branch I've been going to for 9 years, and the same bank I've been with for at least 20 years. They had just updated their computer system, and I guess my account was not carried over. The teller said I was the first person she encountered with this problem. The CRA constantly has a hard time finding me in their system. Nearly every year during tax time I have to call them because my account doesn't exist. They cannot find me, and when they do, they act like it was buried in some forgotten corner of their files. Or something. My pharmacy lost my information a few times. I even switched pharmacies, and still have the same issue. It happens so much that when it happens, I'm completely unsurprised. I have my SIN, healthcare number, and driver's license numbers memorized because it happens so much. When I tell my mother, she goes, "Wow, you really are cursed." It's like I'm either not supposed to exist, am cursed, or in the wrong universe. Redditor 114, I was friends with a girl in high school called Renee, and years later, after my first son, I saw her again at Mom's group. I was so happy to see her again, but she said she never went to my school and didn't know me, but it was her, I swear. And this Renee was also called Renee. I looked through the 1996 school year book and found her, showed her, apparently same maiden name, but she swears it wasn't her. Redditor 115, when I was 14, me and my family were getting ready to go to my cousin's birthday party. His house was a 5-minute walk away on the same street. Everyone in my household left. Me and my mom were the last ones to get ready and leave. She was in her room with the lights on and I was outside as I was about to leave. I shouted, "I'm going now." And she replied, "Okay, I'll see you there." I walked down the street and entered my cousin's house. To my disbelief, my mom was already there. I freaked out but didn't want to sound crazy, and I asked her, "When did you get here?" And she said she had been here for around 20 minutes. I didn't lock the main door of my house because I thought my mom would after I left, and I was too afraid to go back, so I asked my brother and cousin to come with me to lock it as I had forgot. I still don't know who or what I heard that day. Redditor 116, cut my finger on a bus, exposed sheet metal edge. It was sealed up 10 minutes later, except the mark of blood. Redditor 117, driving down the motorway one evening en route to London, drive past a brown Ford Focus with a blonde, older lady at the wheel, clocked the license plate because we used to play a game, make a sentence using the letters to pass the time. We drove past at around 80-90 miles per hour, she was in the slow lane. About 5 minutes later we passed the same car, with the same woman driving, and the same number plate. We're still doing 80-90 and she's still in the slow lane. Everyone thinks I was just mistaken, but I am absolutely certain it was the same car, woman, twice. Redditor 118, mine finally happened a few days ago on Reddit. I made a long-winded comment about some abuse that was exposed in yet another church, nothing new. I noted a few sentences were clunky and were worded strangely, but it was okay, and I wasn't going to retype it all over again because it was a fairly long response. I posted my vitriol and moved on. About 6 posts down from mine, besides the first 2 sentences being completely different, every other word was the same. All of what I thought were my idiosyncratic phrasing and punctuation. I was filled with pride though that this person thought enough of my response that he copied it, put in a new little preface, then traveled back in time an hour prior and beat me to it. Redditor 119, I was sleeping at home one day. I was around 9 or 10 years old when I heard my dad snoring on the couch outside. Except that he couldn't be there because my mom divorced him about a year before and he stopped living with us 2 years ago. I was scared, but I just thought I was hearing things. But my sister gets up and checks outside. This shit was like at 3 a.m., which was when he usually came home. When she came back, I asked her why she went out, and she said she heard our dad snoring too. How to explain that, tbh. Redditor 120 already posted this elsewhere, but here it goes. I work in an assisted living facility. I wash pots and pans, and I also take out the trash. One night I was coming back inside from my trash duty, and I see a coworker of mine walk past me to the locker area, presumably getting ready to head home. So I get to the elevator back to the kitchen and I head up. When I get back up, who do I see in the kitchen? My coworker, getting ready to punch out. There's no way he could have gotten up before me without taking another elevator, and even if he did, he would have had to run. If my coworker was up in the kitchen the entire time, then who the duck did I see downstairs heading towards the locker area? Come to think of it, I didn't get a good look at this person or entity's face. Redditor 121, a year or so ago I went to my boyfriend's house, and I was wearing this black hooded jacket. My family saw me leave in this jacket, my boyfriend and his family saw me in this jacket, but when it was time to go no one could find it. We searched the house, nothing, like it disappeared. When I got back home, I found the jacket laying on my bed like I never wore it, even though everyone saw me wearing it out. Redditor 122, this happened in 1965. During that summer I would go horseback riding several times a week with my 3 friends. The last time we did this I was on a horse that I had ridden many times before, but on that day he was in a really pissed off mood. He fought me every inch of the way, just being contrary. I even took his saddle and blanket off at one point to see if something was wrong there, but no. He was just in a mood. Horses are all insane anyway. We were all just riding our horses up this dirt road, taking our time and talking, when suddenly my horse starts violently bucking and running. I remember thinking, oh crap, this is gonna hurt. And I heard one of my friends scream. Then suddenly we were all a good quarter of a mile on up the road. Just walking along and talking, my horse all calm and as docile as a kitten and behaving perfectly. I turned to my friends and asked, what just happened? They all 3 looked at me in genuine puzzlement and said, when? I was so shocked I couldn't even try to explain clearly, and they really didn't know what I was talking about. I felt so weird, things were so off. Things were off for a long time afterward. For a while I thought that maybe I had been thrown and hit my head. That I had just gotten back on the horse and kinda come to later. But my friends said that didn't happen. Besides, I've been thrown before and you don't escape that without hurting somewhere on your body. I didn't hurt at all. I asked my friends about me having removed my horse's saddle at one point, and none of them recalled that either. This was weird because they had all stopped to wait for me when I had done this. How could they forget that? It made me feel as if I had gone insane. It took me quite a few years to stop puzzling over just what had happened. I still will wonder about it today some, and it has been over 53 years. I guess I should be thankful, it saved me from becoming a horse girl. Never could bring myself to trust those critters again, and I had been looking to buy a horse before this happened. Redditor 123, I recently moved into a new house, and after unpacking everything, I couldn't seem to find my pea coat. This happened to be one of my favorite jackets just because it was very heavy and fit perfectly. I tore my house apart looking for it, going through every closet, every unopened bag, you name it, I went through it. Spent months looking to no avail. Eventually it starts getting cold and I figure I need to go buy a new one. I open my closet to find it dead center in the middle of my closet hanging. I have no clue where it was or how it got there, but I definitely would have noticed it being right there before. Redditor 124, a couple of years ago, I was staying at my friend's caravan with my parents in the Lake District, England. We visited Keswick, and I found a really beautiful and very unique looking silver ring there, made by a local craftsman. I was very pleased with it. That night, I took the ring off and placed it next to the tea caddy in the kitchen while I went to get a shower. When I came back, the ring was gone. I actually had a pretty bad argument with my mother. She had cleaned up a bit, and I was convinced that she had thrown it in the trash or something. She was furious and insisted that she didn't touch anything, and we turned the place upside down searching for the ring. We checked all our luggage, everything. 6 months later, I visited Greece with my parents. I was the first one to enter my single apartment. My parents did not enter at all. They were staying in the apartment downstairs. I set about getting ready, pouring a nice glass of wine, etc. I noticed something on the bed. It was the goddamn ring. The exact same ring, my size, with the same unique pattern and twists in the metalwork. I was spooked and went straight to my parents' apartment to ask if they had somehow slipped it in there. Of course they hadn't come near my apartment. It was so damned weird and I have no explanation for it. I wasn't even using the same suitcase, and I had summer clothes in Greece, thick jumpers and stuff in the lakes, so I can't even theorize that it somehow got ensnared in clothes I hadn't even unpacked at that point. Redditor 125, everyone disappeared at my school. Seriously. For 5-6 minutes, in the middle of a day, I saw or heard no one. There wasn't any special going on either, nor were there any classes at the time. I guess the area didn't load in correctly. Redditor 126, I once, presumably, had a skiing accident. I had been skiing with a friend and coworker. We were both lift operators at the mountain. We'll call him Ben, and he was a bit faster than me, so we usually just met at the bottom of whatever run we were on when we skied together. This particular day I only remember halfway down our first run. I could tell I was having an off day, because I fell when I went into the trees on the first run, and both my skis ejected off. It took both of us like 5 minutes to find them in the deep snow. I remember this fall vividly, and I wasn't going fast. I basically just got launched forward and fell into a pile of soft snow. I know this isn't where I got hurt, but I don't remember anything past finding my skis and getting them on. Next thing I know, I'm in my room opening the door for another friend, John. He asks if I'm okay and looks worried. I was confused and he asks if I remember texting him and I didn't, so I looked at my phone. I had a bunch of texts from Ben asking if I'm okay and I had texted him I hurt my hand and was tired, so I just skied back home. Sure enough, I look at my hand and it's swollen and I can't move my thumb. Turns out to be skier's thumb, nasty injury. I had also texted John and said I think I gave myself a concussion. Spoiler alert, I did. I didn't remember what happened or how I managed to make it back to my room. My main concern at that point was if another person was involved, and if they were okay, or if we had exchanged information, because if it had been my fault I could get sued. Then I realize I have no idea where my skis or poles are. My friend John helps me look, and we tear apart my room and can't find them. Next day, I go to guest services and ask them where my season pass had been scanned the day before. They tell me I took 2 different base lifts 3 times each. At this point I have a vague memory comeback of being at one of the upper mountain lifts, which Ben confirms is the last place he saw me. I have no memory of any of these runs. I then go to ski patrol to see if they responded to an incident, and to see if they have my skis. They didn't have any record of me or any collisions with an unidentified party, and they haven't found any skis. I go back to my locked room and lay in the bed I slept in the night before, only to find my skis. I know John had searched my bed, so it wasn't just my concussed self missing them, and surely I would have noticed sleeping in a twin bed with 2 long metal-edged planks of wood. I still wish I remembered what happened, and how my skis ended up in my bed. The weirdest thing was they were perfectly locked together and even had a Velcro strap keeping them together that wasn't mine, so I know someone must have helped me. I was concerned I had just stepped out of them at the base of the mountain and walked home without them, so I'm glad I didn't lose them, but it's such a big mystery. If any strangers out there helped a concussed girl in a Buffalo Sabres jersey at Copper Mountain last winter, thanks. Redditor 127, as an 8-year-old kid I was stepping off the last step of a staircase in my living room and tripped. Well, everything slowed down extremely slow and got pixelated. It went back to normal after I touched the ground.